Hey everybody, that was Perenge, a great talented musician. Perenge from his album Ayahuasca Remixed. Fantastic. The original is a great album. Ayahuasca, the original motion picture soundtrack, and name of that song is Chacruna, the Drum Spider remix. So yeah, I'm just really digging this musician and all the music he makes, and so go check that out. Whatever, on Spotify or wherever you get music from. Anyway, hey, what's up, everyone? And hello, new people. So I've been on a little bit of a hiatus, I guess you could say. I'm down here in Iquitos, Peru. I'm sitting in my hotel room right now recording this. And I've been in the Amazon jungle for the past 3 weeks. So normally I release a podcast episode once a week. Sometimes just a bonus episode is thrown in there. For the next 3 months, it's going to be less than that. How much less? I don't know. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Also, on a technical note, I only currently have one microphone right now. I chose to buy another microphone to travel with, and I thought that maybe I'd just get like a kind of a lesser quality microphone because, I'm going to be traveling and it's going to be in the jungle, and it's, I've been reading a lot of things and asking people who live here that it's like super humid and, electronics can get damaged. So I was just like, okay, let me buy like a mic that's, whatever, like not like the greatest mic. But anyway, long story short, I wound up actually breaking it. Apparently it wasn't that good of quality. I mean, I was kind of trying to pack it in my bag anyway. Just to give you guys a little inside scoop as to what's going on, for this upcoming interview that I have here, we actually were only using one microphone. So I just got to say thank you so much to Sean Chiddy, who is the guest today, for participating in that. And dealing with the situation where we were kind of just passing the microphone back and forth. Longtime listeners, you'll definitely notice there's a little bit of a difference in the conversational flow, but otherwise, great talk. Sean's an awesome guy. I got to meet him when I came down here. For my beginning of my work residency. I should say at the Temple of the Way of Light, and so far it's been absolutely phenomenal. It's just really great. Everybody there is super amazing people. All the guests that come in are amazing people as well. Just like so many interesting people from all walks of life, all ages, all backgrounds, all over the world. Little global communities of people connecting, and it's just a really special place, really truly an amazing thing that's going on, and I'm glad to be a part of it. So, yeah, what else do I have to say? Not too much, just obviously just trying to make it clear that, I am in the Amazon jungle. I do have limited internet access, so I'm not able to check messages, and, trust me, thank you so much. I'm overwhelmed with the messages and the donations that have come in. So it's just been really tremendous. So just know that I will eventually reply to you. I will eventually get back to you. I will eventually give you your deserved shout outs. Of course, my boy Mason, who edited his pledge on Patreon to me, warms my heart so much. Thank you, man. One of my biggest supporters, if not the biggest supporter, which I think you are on Patreon. $50 a month Mason is contributing to me on Patreon to support this show, to support the message of psychedelics and liberty, self-improvement and healing and consciousness expanding and all that good stuff that we talk about here on Mycadelic. So thank you so much, Mason. And thanks to some new Patreon subscribers. Christopher, thank you so much. Pledged $5 since I've been in the Amazon jungle. So thank you, Christopher, for your $5 pledge. And Interesting posted $5. So thank you, Interesting. That's very interesting. Thank you for your pledge. Thank you so much for your financial contribution to this show. Obviously, as you guys know, I don't have any advertisers or anything like that. No outside forces, no, man behind the scenes telling me what to say and do. It's just me to you, and you support this show fully funded by you. So I want to give you a huge special thank you from my heart. I feel so grateful that I'm allowed to do this, and just really super special that we have this relationship where you guys are supporting something that you truly care about, and I'm able to hopefully always deliver on what you like. So thank you so much. Today's guest, Sean Chiddy. Sean Chiddy is a psychotherapist and integration consultant that works with the Temple of the Way of Light. He offers classes for the Deep Immersion program on mindfulness and meditation and integration. He's a psychotherapist and he provides a lot of his services remotely. He's always traveling around. I think he's headed to Mexico right now. And you can set up sessions with him and contact him, and he provides his support for individuals through Skype. He works with individuals, with couples, with groups. And just a really great guy, really smart guy, just full of tons of knowledge and information and wisdom, and really poised and grounded, and just funny, good sense of humor, which is always important, and just a great person that you want to have around, especially when you're working with like master plants, plant medicines, and ayahuasca specifically. It's just so good to have this extra added component to it, the component that Sean provides. And obviously, there's a lot of people out there that are providing, sort of these sorts of services. But I have to say, it's really a matter of what fits for you. And for somebody like me, for maybe some people in the sort of younger generation, Sean is really somebody that you can relate to. He's really somebody that gets it, really humble, and just a good guy. And you'll see, from this interview, the wonderful things that he has to say. And so what else can I say about Sean? What else can I say about this interview? He coaches people towards personal and career goals. That's another service he offers. I'll put his links in the show note. He works with people who suffer from anxiety and depression, social anxiety, panic attacks, PTSD, OCD, and he provides group training in mindfulness and meditation, which is what he was doing at the Temple of the Way of Light. So he's part of the integration team there at the Temple of the Way of Light in Peru. And it's super amazing. Super amazing. There's, my whole time here, it's just I need to develop more of I need to develop more of a vocabulary. I need to start being able to actually speak a little bit better, because I keep saying amazing, incredible, just really fantastic, breathtaking. It's, I want to come up with a better way to kind of really, really paint the picture of what's actually happening here. But then again, maybe it's just you have to come and experience it. I think it's just something that you have to experience. So yeah, without further ado, thank you so much again. Once again, I am in the Amazon, currently in the Amazon jungle. I've just come to town in Iquitos. I'll be coming to town about once a month, but I will be here for 3 months. So my internet access is limited, but no, I will respond to you. I will get back to you. Please always, as always, provide me with feedback for the show. Let me know if you like it. Let me know what you think. What you think of these conversations, and all the feedback is much appreciated. I always reply. It just will be a little delayed this time. And if you really enjoy the show, the best way to help us out is go leave a 5-star review on iTunes. It helps the show. It helps book interesting guests and attract new people to find the show, people that are searching for these kinds of messages that we're talking about in the show. So please go ahead and do that if you can. That would be really much appreciated. Right now we have 86 5-star reviews, ratings and reviews on iTunes, which is absolutely amazing. So thank you so much. You guys are all really fantastic and really incredible. There come those words again. So anyway, without further ado, speaking about fantastic and incredible, Sean Chiddy is just an awesome human being. Had a pleasure to work with and hang out with for the past 3 weeks, and hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. And I will talk to you hopefully sooner rather than later. Just know that I'm working on getting out as many episodes as I possibly can, and dealing with the technical difficulties that we're dealing with. I'm going to try and release as much as I can when I'm down here, whenever I can. I miss the interaction, the constant interaction, but we'll be back resuming normal schedule May 1st, hopefully. So until then, maybe about 2 episodes a month, maybe more if I can. But without further ado, let's get to our conversation with psychotherapist and integration consultant from the Temple of the Way of Light, Mr. Sean Chiddy.
Psychedelics are illegal not because a loving government is concerned that you may jump out of a 3rd-story window. Psychedelics are illegal because they dissolve opinion structures and culturally laid down models of behavior and information processing. They open to us the possibility that everything we know is wrong.
We don't need new laws that control our consciousness and rigidly place it in a prison.
Cognitive liberty. The fact that as adults, if we're not hurting anybody else, we should have the right to explore the contours of our own consciousness without any mediation or legislation on the part of somebody else.
Reject authority. Authority is a lie.
Voice of perception.
Information is power, but we have to seize the opportunity.
You've been working at the temple now for a little while. What brought you here? What brought you on the ayahuasca path? How did you wind up where you are now?
I started working with ayahuasca about I think 7 years ago now, and obviously it's a very, very compelling experience, as you know well. And I was working in London as a psychotherapist at the time, and I was with my then girlfriend, and we basically saw an advertisement for the temple looking for facilitators, and she really wanted to apply for that. And basically I wasn't even thinking about applying, but she was worried, like, well, what are you going to do? Like, I want to go without you, kind of thing. And so I ended up applying as well, and in the end we were both accepted. And obviously we were very excited because the temple has an amazing reputation, and I'd never at that stage worked in the Shipibo tradition before, so I was really excited by the prospect of that, because obviously the Shipibos have an outstanding reputation for their ayahuasca work, rightly so.
Yeah, and you were saying that you had drank ayahuasca before. You were telling a little story about, maybe I think it was maybe your first time. Can you talk a little bit about some of your first, your first introduction to it, how you came about this medicine and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I guess I'd been working in other forms of healing for a number of years, primarily centered with kind of healing meditation techniques, so applied strategies for working in a meditative way on specific issues, which is somewhat different to how meditation is often presented, but very, very effective, and that was a path that I was on. And I think the first time I heard about ayahuasca was, I believe it was a Time magazine article, and apparently by reader responses rated to be the best read Time magazine article of all time. And in it, the author was writing about her experience of purging up she had a vision of purging up a snake, and this snake represented her depression, and that's what she'd been wanting to heal. And after that, she noticed that her depression was basically gone, which is a pretty amazing outcome. And certainly to me at that stage, working with depression is often something that takes quite a while. And so that she got such a profound effect from her ceremonies really inspired me. I think I forgot about it for a while after that, but it stayed in the back of my mind. And then when I was in the UK, I think I saw the documentary DMT, The Spirit Molecule, the documentary based on the book and the famous study. And that really inspired me again to look out for ayahuasca. And so I Googled it. And at the time in the UK, there was a website, ayahuascauk.com. And so I found a retreat coming up basically the next weekend or so after that. And I ended up going to that. And yeah, it was an amazing and very strong experience. I think I died once or twice in the first ceremony or the second one, in my kind of visions, and having that experience of that was really profound. It was such a compelling experience that from that point there was really no turning back for me. I was in. I think I already had an appreciation of the potential of plant medicine from having worked a little bit in a very, very sort of informal, more or less social way with magic mushrooms back in Australia. And so, yeah, I kind of, had that sense that many people have, that there's something here for them, and there certainly has been for me. So that's where I got started. And
so did you? You were in school for psychology, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, I studied psychology first of all in Australia, and I qualified as a psychologist there, and worked as a registered psychologist in Australia for a little while before I moved to the UK. And then in the UK, I ended up working as a cognitive behavioral psychotherapist, and I did some further postgraduate training at King's College in London as a cognitive behavioral psychotherapist. I'd also done a lot of informal training. Well, informal meaning non-university based training. It was formal training, but it was in different healing systems, especially based on the meditative types of healing, which is essentially what my personal bedrock practice is, and that's, as you would have seen in the classes we've been doing, that's the frame I give to everything else. Even CBT I frame within that, because it's a really helpful platform for becoming kind of flexible and reflective with what's going on, which makes it easier to understand how to be flexible in general with your thoughts and beliefs and behavioral patterns and all the kinds of things that we want to then work on.
Can you I've got like two-part question, I guess, but like first is just elaborate on what CBT is, cognitive behavioral therapy. Just maybe talk a little bit about that for some people that are unfamiliar. And then the second part of what I want to know is that, did the mindfulness sort of container to all of these, including the mindfulness in everything, did that emerge from as part of your curriculum in school, or was that something that emerged on its own from your own personal kind of investigation?
Thanks. Yeah, that's a great question. And so when I originally was studying psychology, mindfulness was not a part of the curriculum per se. Cognitive behavioral therapy is basically the fusion of cognitive therapy and behavioral therapy. So cognitive therapy looks at the way in which beliefs moderate our emotional state and direct our behavioral patterns and responses, and how that basically interacts with the whole system of our emotions and our physiological state and our behaviors and routines and habits. And it looks at a variety of strategies for giving opportunities to learn something different. Obviously, often enough, we're working to kind of moderate challenging emotional states, such as stress, anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, panic attacks, post-traumatic stress disorder, and various, things like that. So the main field I've been working in the UK, they call it common mental health problems. And so the ones I've been listening all fit under that banner. Yeah. And in terms of the mindfulness, I first heard about meditation visiting a Buddhist center in high school as a part of a studies of religion excursion. And then later when I started working, I think I was aged about 20, 21, I kind of guess I, at that stage, already had that impulse to really learn about healing for my own benefit. I think I was probably working with kind of anxiety concerns, a bit of social anxiety, and a kind of state of, I guess you could call it like recurrent sort of mild to moderate depression, which I think are things that are fairly common actually. Yeah, I think, that's why they call them common mental health problems. They're things that a lot of people experience around the world, especially, we know about them obviously very much in the West, in the context in which I've been working, but I'm sure they're everywhere. And so that was my motivation for seeking to learn about healing. And very early on, I started practicing meditation with the binaural beats meditation system, which some people might know about, but it's very effective. And I also started then just kind of looking around into different things. It was the first time I had, at that workplace, was the first time I had good access to the internet, and I really maxed out that because I guess I was somewhat bored of the work I was supposed to be doing and ended up getting distracted into that. And it really led me on a whole path of discovery, which has never ended to this day. Actually, it just continues to grow and evolve. But I started studying a healing process with a very, very interesting school called the Institute for the Study of Peak States of Consciousness. They basically have a developmental trauma model. It's quite unique and very, very interesting way of modeling things that they've basically researched a lot through using the kind of visions that they perceive during states of meditation. I mean, that's a whole other story to describe all of that, but that's, just a very brief overview of it. But that's where I really started to practice the healing meditation techniques, and they're very applied. So they're very directed towards healing or resolving difficult emotions that you might be experiencing, and also intended to model and understand how we gain access to these kind of peak states of consciousness, if you like. So the states of consciousness that we don't necessarily come across that much on a day-to-day basis, but that we know are out there. So states of deep peace, states of happiness, kind of like altered vision states, states of bliss, and of course, the sort of void consciousness states and the states that are often aimed for in traditional spiritual practices. And then I also obviously became aware of mindfulness coming into mainstream psychology practice. I think, that can be attributed to people like John Kabat-Zinn in the United States, bringing it into the hospital system for pain management. And I think from there, it really started to spread throughout the entire Western mental health system. And so I also obviously learned that system, and I've taught that in pain management settings in the UK, and worked in pain management in Australia as well. It's also really useful for managing recurrent depression and various kind of chronic illnesses which don't necessarily have a ready cure. And I think what I've ended up with today is a kind of what do you call it, like a fusion of all of that. Basically, they call it, when I train, they call it technical eclecticism. Basically, it's you become congruent in yourself with an understanding derived from all the influences that you've had. So yeah, that's how it it just naturally fits together. It's some of these things seem different on the surface, but mindfulness based practices are becoming more and more common, and mindfulness based CBT is becoming more and more common too.
Yeah, so like I think there's a lot of there's a lot of like newness to this. Would that be a correct thing to say? Like it seems like there's a lot of the older kind of Eastern traditions of the mindfulness practices, things that cultures have known for a very long time, are now finally being accepted in the kind of Western psychological model. But you still have a lot of this kind of materialist, reductionist psychology that's out there that doesn't really seem to be beneficial in terms of working with plant medicines. It doesn't connect, So this is something that's kind of new and emerging and growing. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess it's a complex question to answer, and I think a lot of people will have different opinions about this. My personal opinion basically is there's nothing new under the sun. When I've had conversations with colleagues who've spent time studying in India and are very kind of grounded in some of the traditional Indian approaches to spiritual work and meditation and yoga, what I found through our conversations actually is that a lot of the principles that are applied even in something as apparently Western as cognitive therapy are actually present also in many of the traditional Indian approaches, and so there is no conflict between them at all. They fundamentally in line with one another. For example, the sort of one of the principal cognitive errors that we make is personalization. We've talked about this a bit in some of the classes, but the idea that when we experience certain things, we often write ourselves into a central role in what's going on. So if people behave a certain way, we often think that a part of the way that they're behaving is because of something about us. Like if they don't say hello to us, it's because they don't like us. That's when we're kind of like personalizing their behavior and making it about us. And that is actually a fundamental thinking error in the Eastern spiritual traditions as well, as far as I understand it. And so, that's a direct correlation there between the understanding and what is taught and practiced. And again, in terms of the other thing that you mentioned about the idea that some of these reductionist approaches don't mesh well with plant medicine work, my experience has actually been the exact opposite. That I've heard exactly what you've said, and I guess I understand where it's coming from up to a point. But what I found when I started offering some of these classes here at the temple is that the feedback was actually really fantastic, and people were directly saying that what they were learning in the lessons came up in their ceremonies and really helped them process some of what they were working on. And I think that's because we're just working with the mind and the soul and the emotions and everything that makes us human. And anything that works will still work when you add plants into that, more or less. It's not like you stop being human just because you start taking plants. It's like you just have a new ally. And I think what I've noticed, especially with ayahuasca, which is the main place I've been applying these strategies, is that ayahuasca has an amazing capacity to work with anything that's going on in our mind. And so if we are thinking about things according to certain structures, even if they're reductionist, it can very fluidly and very intelligently incorporate that into the experience. It just happens that way. It doesn't seem to have the limits to what it can I guess incorporate. And essentially, I think it's basically whatever we're focused on, whatever our intentions are and whatever our practices and behaviors are, ayahuasca catalyzes that even further. So if you're working on psychological strategies, it will catalyze them. If you're practicing art, it will inspire your art. If you're a musician, it will inspire your music. If you're a business person, it will often inspire your business too. There doesn't seem to be nothing is excluded.
Yeah, no, that was a great response, and I think I maybe flubbed the kind of question a little bit, because in my head I was thinking more along the lines of, like, for example, I see a therapist at home who is unaware of this entire plant medicine realm. So I think in his mind, he's, and I'm probably putting words in his mouth, but from our conversations, he's inquisitive about what this is. He's intrigued, but I think there's still like a barrier in his mind. And so I was talking more along the lines of practitioners of, you went to Harvard, you got your degree or whatever it was, and you kind of stayed along the kind of conservative mainstream path of practicing, being a practicing psychologist, clinical psychologist, and things like that. Whereas maybe in the minds of some of these people who are doing that, they would maybe discount integrating these sorts of experiences into their work. Maybe that's, in my guess, maybe that's because it undermines their academic achievements or something like that. But I don't think that's the case at all. I think what you said is perfectly true, that it's a perfect fit and it's a perfect match. And I think that's a perfect kind of little microcosm for what, in my opinion, how I see the world healing and advancing is mixing cultures and kind of taking the best of what works from the indigenous way, from the plant way, and trying to mesh that into what we've learned in our kind of studious, academic way of doing things. So more of just a comment on that, but yeah, if you want to elaborate further, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think what you've said there makes a lot of sense, and I suppose it's interesting. I think a lot of things come down to people's personal preferences, perspectives, and understanding. And so, obviously, a lot of people who haven't worked with plant medicines will have, potentially some prejudices against them. Like you said, they might have kind of professional defensiveness against being, forced to face the fact that these plant medicines are very powerful in helping people in the domains that those guys are, those people and men and women are trying to help people in. And they might just not realize yet, or they just, they're prejudiced against it for whatever reason. But actually, I also think that there's a lot bubbling away under the surface, and that, for example, I remember meeting a psychiatrist in a ceremony working with San Pedro, and I talked to him a bit about his work as a psychiatrist and what would happen if his colleagues found out what he was doing. And he said he would be fired on the spot, most likely, and he absolutely wouldn't mention it at work. But I'm sure he's not alone out there, actually. And certainly for myself, when I first started working with plant medicines, I never would have mentioned it very much in my work environment, except to, people I trusted or figured would be accepting of it or have some understanding already. But then when I left the work that I was doing in the UK to come here to Peru, I did tell my colleagues where I was going because I wasn't concerned about it anymore. And actually, the response I got was so excited and enthusiastic and encouraging that I wondered why I bothered to keep my mouth shut in the first place. So I think actually, people might be surprised to find out how many other people are already, sharing some of their thoughts. And there's a lot of people out there who are curious, even if they've never worked with plants. And certainly what you said about, integrating Eastern and Western and whatever you want to call it, practices from indigenous peoples and Western peoples and peoples from all over the world and different spiritual traditions. I think that's definitely, that's happening. And I think a part of it is about bridging, because obviously if you're living in a certain context and then working with plant medicines maybe in an indigenous setting or wherever you're doing it, and then going back into that context, there are some kind of understandings that can help you, because basically you still have a Western mindset and you're still living in an environment where you may be brought up to think about things in a materialist way or a very intellectual way or whatever it may be. All these things are highly variable between people, but then obviously having tools and strategies to help you integrate that directly speak to that and to your life experience really makes a huge difference. And that's basically what we're all about.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think this is a perfect segue to what I want to talk about next is, a lot of people, they're hearing about ayahuasca, they're hearing about the amazing healing power that it can cure depression and cure PTSD and all these wonderful things. And it is a wonderful plant medicine. It can definitely help with a lot of these traumas and alleviate these sorts of different kinds of ailments and neuroses and all these sorts of things. So it's absolutely wonderful that we have this opportunity now to take part in such a ancient, sacred thing. But one of the most important things is after. I think Jack Kornfield has this book called "After the Ecstasy, Now the Laundry." And it's like that's life, right? Like that. This is the world that we live in. I think that even myself, I've had some wild-eyed fantasy of like running off to the jungle and just kind of living there. Or I mean, I'm here now. Here we are. But then this isn't my home. This isn't my culture. And there is the whole other world that's out there, the world that we came from. This world is we're able to kind of borrow from it or learn from it, temporarily. But there's a lot to learn here, and there's a lot to integrate. Now, let's talk about that. Let's talk about integration. First of all, I want to know, what does integration mean? What does it really mean to practice integration, and what are some, why is this such an important thing? Maybe we could start there and then get deeper into this hugely important aspect of the ayahuasca experience.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, so the ayahuasca is a very powerful catalyst for change, essentially, and we know that change is challenging, and we have many ways of resisting it. And certainly, if we come to a workshop or a retreat, then we're in a setting where the space is open for us to really go deeply into that work and to learn amazing things, to experience amazing things, to face things in ourselves, to face traumas, to face difficult emotions, and to basically go beyond what is normally accessible to us in our normal state of mind, with the assistance of the medicine, and here, with the Shipibos, with the Icaros and the other plant medicines that are used, and all the practices that we're doing here. And so then the integration challenge becomes basically, when we go home, there can be ongoing work to do. And, that raises many opportunities and many challenges. Sometimes there is residual aspects of traumas that need to be contained and healed. Sometimes we've really opened up emotionally, or we've opened up our creative potentials, or we've been inspired to do different things. And when we go home, we might not be in a situation where everybody's 100% on board with us with that. They might not understand what we've gone through. They might be just expecting us to be the same old person. Whatever it may be, there's any number of ways that can manifest. And so integration basically involves kind of keeping a channel open for the processes of the medicine and the plants to continue unfolding. And that can be easy or hard, and it can be easy and hard. And so basically what we're looking to do is bring awareness to that, as well as providing systems to support that, and to offer, resources, and ourselves as well as personal resources to help people understand what they're going through, and to make the best of it, basically, and to keep building on whatever they've achieved, and really to be able to contain anything that's challenging them.
Yeah, and I think that just to kind of fly out to a grander perspective a little bit, and talk in terms of like the culture and where we're at in our history here. It seems that a lot of these ailments and dysfunctions, if you want to call them that, like that develop in people, seem to be coming from sort of the culture in which we live in. Would you agree with that? Or
yeah, absolutely. I mean, all problems are up to a point culturally bound, particularly psychological and spiritual problems, very much so. Obviously, if your physical problems are arguably less so, because if you break your leg regardless of where you're from. But certainly, ailments that are really, if we're talking from a Western perspective, which I guess we are for the most part here, that problems like we have an epidemic of depression it's becoming a huge problem, and this is arguably due to individualism and isolation and the social isolation that goes on with that, as well as perhaps the absence of true rich spiritual practice and understanding that many people experience. And obviously we have a lot of people have either rejected church teachings if they were brought up Christian, or whatever religion they might have been born into and been practicing. There's often a sense that the institutions that are overseeing them are perhaps not offering people the real spiritual sense that they need, and so people are falling away from that. Obviously, there's been lots of controversies going on in some churches and things like that have led to people leaving them in large numbers and a big loss of their influence. And there's a kind of void left behind of that. Some people don't care about it. Some people think that, obviously if they take a materialist perspective, they think there's spiritual realities are not in existence, but nevertheless, they might still be experiencing, some of these, what we call, again, they're called common mental health problems because they're very common. And they do seem to be very much bound up in social isolation, in perhaps, I guess you could say, an over-intellectualized perspective on things sometimes, because when our thought patterns really run away with themselves, that leads to all sorts of troubles. And basically the solutions to them often involve opening up giving more attention and building more understanding of other aspects of our consciousness, like our the logic of our emotions, and understanding how to work more fluidly with emotions, and opening up to spiritual practices and experience can really do a lot to help people, as well as forming community. Absolutely, because given that this sense of isolation and not having people to really connect with and share with deeply seems to be a foundational problem present in a lot of people's challenges. That opening up and connecting to community is also a very important aspect of that.
Yeah, definitely. Community is huge, and I talk about that a lot on this show. That the importance of that community and the connection with other people. I think there's a tendency to think that, oh my God, we're suffering. There's something wrong with me. I'm depressed. I have anxiety. There's something wrong with me. And the kind of pharmaceutical medical model is like, okay, well, here's a pill. This will isolate your feelings of depression, and this is isolated to handle that one particular thing. But then there's all these side effects. Now maybe you have to take another pill to counteract some of the side effects that you face with that. And that seems to be kind of the way that our culture wants to handle it, instead of properly educating people on the tools that we can use, the tools that you work with, the tools of mindfulness, the tools of I think you said like false belief systems and things like that. Like it's really, I feel like we're really in a process right now. A lot of people like to talk about this kind of transitionary type of time period that we're in right now. And I think that seems to be the case. I think we're living in an unprecedented time right now where people are connected like never before. We have information at the drop of a hat. We can see how other people are living in other cultures. We can visit them, in a matter of hours. You don't have to take a wagon trail and worry about getting eaten by a pack of rabid dogs. We're living in really unprecedented times right now, and because of that, it's pretty turbulent, right? And there seems to be an unpeeling that's happening or something. So really, it's I'm wondering, like, when people are getting, when we approach this sort of healing work, that we're doing, it's after the fact, after we've sort of gone through this process, this journey, that we've made the decision to acknowledge the fact that we need to do something so that we could better handle the way that we're interpreting the world. But then again, there's the world. So what do you do there? It's just a matter of time, I suppose, right? Where more and more people are educated in order to use the tools of the mind, to use the tools that a lot of, I guess, ancient cultures, have used for thousands of years that we're now sort of meshing together, right? To kind of to fully integrate. So not only integrating our individual experiences, but the culture as a whole is sort of going through an integration process. And I'm talking about the Western culture. So yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean that's a huge question. So I'll do my best to say a few things. Yeah, basically, firstly, I think there is an understanding in the West that psychological tools are very important for working with the common mental health problems that we've been talking about, and certainly this preference for giving people medication is still there in some ways, but actually it is established in the research that even if someone is taking antidepressants, for example, that having psychological treatment alongside it makes the benefits more enduring, basically, than if they're just taking the medication. And so I don't think we need to become anti-pharmaceutical medication in a black and white way. I think it's just certainly there's an evolution going on in understanding how important the psychological and other treatment systems are alongside that, and also just self-standing, of course, because you don't have to take medication unless you absolutely need them or want them. There's plenty of alternatives to that, and yeah, absolutely what you said about there's an explosion of access to information, which means that we do have the opportunities. If you've got internet access and even just socially, people are exchanging all kinds of information that certainly in my personal experience, my parents and were far less interested in, and my grandparents' generation wouldn't have had any understanding of whatsoever. And I think for them, certainly, if we talk about being open to engaging with other traditions and cultures and the practices that come from them, they probably would have seen that as very foreign and probably had lots of judgments about it that are becoming, that tide is definitely turning around completely. We're really learning to understand and respect that actually, like I said, there's nothing new under the sun, and that many of the things we think are new discoveries are just not, and that actually, a lot of these understandings are actually derivative of ancient understandings anyway. And so I think, if we call this the information age, if you like, I think that's going to continue. And like you say, there is going to be a process of hybridization that continues. Even the temple itself is effectively offering a hybrid presentation. Obviously, we honor the Shipibo tradition, and that is at the centerpiece of all the work that we do. But even even in our conversations with the maestros, they really appreciate the extra work that we're doing to support support our guests in this ayahuasca work, because some of the questions that they're asking just aren't really relevant into the ways of thinking that some of the indigenous cultures have, because they don't have those problems, because they're not living in a different culture, so they haven't necessarily considered solutions to them either. It's not that they don't have problems, it's just that they have their own ways of working with all of that are different and specific to them, and that's fantastic. But obviously then we are here to kind of bridge that gap for people coming from Western cultures. And I think, that's going to continue. Of course it is. It definitely seems like a wave that's going on at the moment, and who knows where it's going to lead. It's actually very exciting, really. It brings me great hope for the future.
Yeah, and I think that the temple is really kind of leading the way in terms of in the ayahuasca sphere, but also in just a general sense of really bringing a balanced approach and a responsible approach to the healing modality, to some people would say awakening people to a higher frequency or vibration or consciousness or whatever, however you want to describe it. But people are coming out with new perspectives, new understandings, and that is really what it's all about, right? And to me, it seems like the message of ayahuasca, if there is a message of ayahuasca, is to, hey, humans, get your shit straightened out, so you stop fucking shit up, so we can all live in balance and sort of harmony and respect for each other. And that's not to say that we're all going to hold hands and everybody's going to get along and we're going to skip around and sing Kumbaya together. But it seems like that, the people in these indigenous cultures, the people that I'm aware of in these indigenous cultures, the way that they behave and the way that they act is they take from the land, they use what is appropriate to use, they don't take too much, and they live in the earth because we are from the earth. It seems like we've really, for whatever reason, have gotten away from that, where we try to kind of dominate everything and pave everything over. Not to say that that's, sure, a paved road's nice, maybe you need a building, an office building, these sorts of things. But it seems like we've lost our way in terms of what's appropriate, where there's a balance, and this sort of idea that we can just kind of march around the world and do whatever we want without having any repercussions. So, in my understanding, it's like maybe ayahuasca and maybe all kinds of plant medicines are trying to send a message to us to say, hey, you're not the only sentient beings around here on this lot. We should all kind of work together here to at least have somewhat of a reasonable existence, right? So then, I'd love for you to comment on that, but also I just want to say this piece about integration, where it's like you come here, you get some healing work done, right? You go back home. Now, say you're working at like Exxon Mobil, like you're like a CEO or something. Like, I mean, I'm not CEO, but yeah, you're some like the CEO of Exxon Mobil. Keep drinking, stay here. Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? So it's like we have these jobs, these functions, the way that our society is structured and engineered in such a way that it really makes it hard to be compatible with the lessons that we've learned or the way that we want to live our lives. I think what I see is a lot of people disengaging with that, choosing to start their own businesses or get involved with things that are regenerative and sustainable and healthy with a balanced approach. So, that, do you think that's kind of like the larger goal of integration at a societal level?
Wow, yeah, I feel like it's like where angels feet to tread to answer that question. What do I think should happen in the world? Well, I don't know the answer to that. I certainly understand, and the themes that you've been talking about, and they're out there. I mean, obviously there's a lot of people deeply concerned all over the world about, the rate at which we're consuming resources, and the environmental impact of the way that we live, and the sort of what we might call the runaway consumerism, if you like. I don't know what the solution is. I think that I've never had an experience working with plant medicines or in healing meditation where I just said, yeah, let's consume more, come into my mind. It certainly doesn't seem to be like that. I mean, I personally have very few possessions right now. I have one large backpack, one small backpack, and that's basically all I travel with. And then apart from that, I have, just like a couple of shoe boxes stored in my dad's house and one pile of paperwork at my brother's house. And that's my total possessions in the world. And so I didn't really even, think about that or plan it in advance as some kind of big philosophical endeavor. It just, obviously, when I started traveling, suited my lifestyle, and I soon found out I didn't need any of it anyway. So I don't have a kind of like permanent residence at the moment either. So I haven't had any opportunity to build anything up, but I don't think that my experience is entirely unique. So I guess I can answer your question more in terms of there is potentially this trend emerging, at least for some people. I'm always very hesitant to tell the world what to do. I feel that's like beyond my qualifications. I mean, it would be absolutely fantastic if we could find more ways of becoming sustainable, and certainly, obviously, the indigenous ways were inherently, like, it's almost ridiculous to say, completely, uncomparably more sustainable. To a degree that is, I wouldn't even know how many noughts you'd have to put on it compared to what's going on all over the world, not just the Western world, but. And so, yeah, we could certainly benefit from finding ways of being more sustainable. How we go about doing that, obviously, and the complexities of the economics of it, the politics of it. Everyone's got their vested interests, and everyone gets a say. And some of the people who get a say are quite powerful. So I don't even know what's going to happen there. But certainly, I think that I can't imagine that if we were to be able to get ayahuasca on the mic, she'd be saying, "Oh yeah, just destroy the place. I'm happy with that." I don't think so. But yeah, I am always hesitant to tell anyone what to do in that at that level. That's a grand game. But yeah, I certainly hear what you're saying, and I feel like that trend will continue to develop kind of inevitably. I think it has to. I mean, I think everyone realizes. Well, not everyone realizes. Actually, there's argument about that out there, of course, too. But I think a lot of people realize and will continue to move in that direction. And yeah, I'll be happy to participate, but I'll also acknowledge that I'm not an expert in the fields of geology and environmental science and economics and all these things that need to be considered there. So I'll participate, but I'll also hand it over to the experts to give their opinions too. But yeah, we'll see what comes, and let's hope it's something good. Hey, but I can't see the future.
Well, I like your politically correct answer, like a politician. But you're right, and it's like, I can be the fool who wildly predicts. I do that on this show quite a bit. But then again, I don't have any credentials to risk worrying about. So it's perfectly fine for me. But yeah, but I'm curious to know, forget about you don't have to worry about being right with a prediction or anything like that. But you must have like a grand vision or something that you really believe in, something that you're hoping to get out of the work that you're doing here with the temple. You're part of the integration team. You're holding the classes on mindfulness. So what is your larger vision in terms of what you would like to see, or what you hope to have, the result being of people coming here and working with you?
Ultimately, I would like people to receive whatever they would like to receive, to be honest. And as I said, that ayahuasca seems to catalyze whatever people are focused on, and there's really no limit to that. So basically, I want the best for myself, and therefore I want the best for other people too. And certainly, in terms of the grand vision of it, it does seem like the potential is for us to profoundly heal at a personal level, which can involve like a whole new understanding of what the potential of life is, in just, from as basic as just like feeling better on a day-to-day basis up to, having an elevated spiritual understanding of the world, or whatever kind of awakenings can go on there, to, enhanced creativity, to even just kind of like seeing and understanding new opportunities and ways of doing things, which can actually contribute to the very things that we've been talking about, like how can we live better on this planet? And I think actually, yeah, that would be, I guess, the aspect that the plants certainly are said to be at their heart, is to teach us how to live, basically, to how to live well on this planet, and how to live well as a human, and how to live well in our communities, basically. And so, it's like, you often hear these sayings that the best gift you can offer to the world is your own liberation. And certainly sometimes these healing paths can, from some people's perspective, seem self-involved and, I guess you could say, dismissive of being involved in the world at large. But actually, I find the opposite is true. The more that we heal ourselves naturally, we become in a better position to engage enthusiastically with things, and we're often inspired to do so. And that's how it has been with my work, absolutely, that I've become more and more confident that the work that I'm doing is useful. And, obviously, I really love sharing it with people. It feels really good to do so. What they then do with it, of course, is up to them. But what I see is that people, working with ayahuasca are inspired in all kinds of directions. I mean, here right now, in the group that's here right now, we have artists, we have musicians, we have business people, we have people who straight from here are going off to volunteer their services in other places here in Peru to help out their community. We have people who are being inspired to improve their relationships at home with their parents and their communities. And I think that that happens kind of naturally. Obviously, there are challenges and to that, but and that's what we're all about, helping people work through. But basically, I think the benefits naturally ripple out to everyone that we're all engaged with, because we just become more ourselves basically in the end. Obviously we can have extraordinary experiences, but in the end we just become, if you like, extraordinarily ordinarily ourselves. That's what I'm finding. I don't feel like I'm becoming someone else. I just feel like I'm becoming more relaxed about myself, and really that's what I want. Obviously I have visions and perspectives of the potential of what can unfold, that are it could be framed in spiritual terms, but I'm also becoming very patient about them as well. Like it's like I'm just less concerned about rushing to any destination, if you like, and becoming more and more appreciative of just living and enjoying my life as best as I can, and offering the best of myself. And that's, I think, again, just what I hope for everyone else too, that they feel good about themselves and able to offer the best of themselves.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, yeah, right on. I totally agree with you there. It's pretty amazing. You said allow, you're like to unfold, and that's patience. Like those words just like, really stuck out to me, because I think a lot of people get into this tendency of like, okay, like we're going to do this thing and it's going to be this way and this is going to happen. And then this is going to, but there is sort of no rush, right? I mean, it is, and you can't really rush it. You can't force people to change. You can't force people along the path. There has to be an ability, or at least just a way for people to see, choose, and then go on the path that they're on, and then allow the journey, that process to unfold in the way that it does. And then, like you said, whatever happens. Like, thankfully, there's a lot of people doing amazing work, so it's like you can do your part, I can do my part, the other people here at the temple, people all around the world that are engaging in this sort of, I don't know what to call it, healing work, I suppose, compassionate work, and yeah, it's an amazing thing. But I was wondering, like, so when you came here 7 years ago and you started your journey, what are some real, like, I'm interested to know, like, what has happened to you during this time? I'm sure a lot has happened to you. We probably don't have time to talk about all the things that have happened to you, but what are some like key takeaways of the, like you said, I think you made a really good point there too. You haven't become a different person. You've just become more of the person that you truly are. And I feel that way as well. I think people might say, "Oh, you've changed." It's like, no. I'm just more me. I'm just more that kid that I was, where nobody was, telling me how to be or what to be, and I didn't have this fear or anxiety or worry around that just kind of primordial self that I was, is now emerging again. And it's wonderful to see that person again and to integrate that whole experience back into my life now. So what are some like key takeaways from your experience of working here and your own personal journey? Some big things that you've learned that you were maybe ignorant to before, or just didn't know, or something like that. I'm sure you have a couple in mind, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I think the kind of thing that I really have started to understand is that everything is going to be absolutely okay. And I know that's a complete and utter truism. But experientially, this is the kind of memories and seeds that have been planted in me by my experiences, and this is a part of where the patience and the lack of, the letting go of this kind of urgent need that we often initially feel to heal comes from. Of course, there are still things that I want to work on, but I just have a much more grounded perspective of that. And I think there's a lot of kind of collapsing of paradoxes that goes on. Like I guess one would be the collapsing of the extraordinary and the ordinary. That basically I have had many extraordinary experiences working with these plants, and that obviously is like highly inspiring and has profoundly changed my worldview to be open to recognizing and understanding that a lot of the things brought up in a fairly materialist paradigm I would have dismissed as nonsense are actually for real. And that was, I'm far more open to, I don't think I've become gullible or foolish about what I consider. I think I just have personal experiences that allow me to calibrate and understand a lot more of what people are saying when they talk about things that sound a bit esoteric. And certainly ayahuasca seems to give a lot of people very direct experiences of things in the spiritual domain. And that obviously then, if you're reading spiritual literature or scripture or whatever it may be, gives you far more ground for understanding it. And that can be really profound, because then essentially you're moving then from what can come across as somewhat intellectual or dogmatic until you have experienced it to become something actually very real and very live. And that, of course, everywhere it is widely acknowledged that having a strong sense of this spiritual world, of the spiritual elements of life, really is very strengthening. Basically, it gives you a great resilience and obviously confidence in life. I think it reduces fear in death. I think that's definitely been observed, which that just kind of ripples out its effects into everywhere in your life. And certainly the other paradox of between, I guess, if you like, this kind of common idea of like wanting to be enlightened, and then just wanting to be yourself, which can, from some perspectives, seem like a paradox. It's almost like some people thinking of enlightenment, thinking that they're trying to overcome themselves, and actually, what I found is basically just having had glimpses and understandings growing in me of some of that terrain, just become more and more happy, and actually, very glad to be alive and to be myself with all my imperfections and my ego. And it's like this kind of shift from, treating your shortcomings as some kind of enemy to be kind of beaten up and attacked or removed, as to actually just realizing it's just an ally. It's like, it's your friend on this path. It's keeping you safe. And these kind of lessons play out in all kinds of ways too, because then when you're interacting with other people, you end up becoming far more compassionate and less reactive and understanding, of their different situations with less judgment. And then that just makes it that much easier to be in the world anywhere, wherever you go, regardless of what path people are on or what they're doing, whether they're doing things that you totally disagree with or not. Obviously, it doesn't mean you don't still get upset, you don't get triggered, you don't get angry and all those things. Of course you do. But it just recontextualizes it all in a really, really nice way. And I think basically, those, and of course, to be willing to take chances, to be willing to be creative, to be willing to make mistakes. And I don't think these are that necessarily that different from what people will hear elsewhere. It just gives a particular, it brings them to life in a unique way, actually, which obviously has to be experienced to be fully understood. But I guess those experiences essentially plant memories in us, if you like, and then from those memories, because basically, our belief systems are built on top of memories, so those directly influence our belief systems and what we then go on to do. And so, we just, as I said, we end up just being more ourselves.
Yeah. So that's great. We're gonna be wrapping up soon. But before we go, I wanna, you've been teaching the classes here that have been wonderful, and I've heard all the guests say, they just have this amazing respect for you, and is Sean going to be there? Is Sean's class happening now? Even people saying I got to check when Sean's going to be at the temple if I come again. These sorts of things. So congratulations, man, because that's amazing. To have that kind of effect on people. But obviously, and I'll say this too, is just that there's, I'm getting a lot of benefit out of the classes that you've been leading. And now you're going to be going to a class right now. You're going to be teaching a class here in one of the Malokas here at the temple. Can you give people maybe a little taste of what you're going to be talking about and how this kind of thing goes down, and a little bit about the classes that you're teaching?
Sure. So, I'm really chuffed with the feedback. It's obviously, I'm really thrilled to get positive feedback, and I'm really thrilled with how engaged these guys are in it all. I love my work, and when I've got a really engaged group like this, it's the best thing for me. And obviously the ayahuasca really helps that too, because it just brings fluidity to all these processes, and as I said a couple of times already, it just catalyzes whatever we're working on. So if people get stuck on something, then they go into ceremony and hey, presto, they're not stuck anymore, which is fantastic. That's really enriching. And so the classes I offered are basically all centered around working with the ayahuasca and giving processes and structures that help people to progress through whatever's coming up. So a lot of them are directed at working with emotions, for example. So we look at different meditative techniques for how to sit with an emotion, how to not fight it, how to focus into it and follow it as it unfolds and progresses in your body in a way that leads to and reveals its own resolution, as well as often some kind of new understanding that forms then around that. Because, one of the other principles I've been teaching basically is our mind is essentially a meaning generating machine, if you like. Give it a reductionist label like that, I'll risk that. And that basically when we feel better, it just introduces a different meaning based on the better feeling. And then if we remember that and recall that, then we can kind of, if you like, update or amend our previous belief system so that we can then, grow in confidence. Obviously, we've also been looking at different strategies for working with thoughts. A lot of these are derived directly from cognitive science and from cognitive behavioral therapy. And so these involve learning to understand the way in which our belief systems form through the various influences from our life, and arguably even ancestrally from before our life, and culturally, and all these factors that surround our individual life, and recognizing all of them, understanding how the thoughts that pop into our head on a day-to-day basis today, or when we're upset or depressed or when we're triggered or anxious or whatever it may be, where they're coming from, to get a really clear picture and understanding of that, which itself, we say, normalizes them. Basically, it gives context to them. That itself can be relieving, remove some of the confusion, some of the self-blame, some of the catastrophization that goes on. And then there are being able to dig into that. There are particular strategies for challenging and reappraising thought systems to give opportunities to see things from a different perspective, which of course then feeds back into our emotions and informs different choices of what to do, how to respond, how to behave, which all feeds back into the same cycle of how we're feeling on every level, emotionally, spiritually, physiologically, in our thoughts, what we're seeing in our mind and our dreams, and this completely fluid, complex system that fits together. So I describe a lot of it as shifting focus from content onto process. So oftentimes we get really caught up and fused with the particular content of what we're thinking about whenever we're feeling a certain way. And by stepping out of that for a moment, obviously we want to understand the content and we want to acknowledge it and give compassion to where it's coming from. But then what I also help people to do is to step out and look at different processes that are going on. So understand thoughts in the domain of thought, how to understand emotions in the domain of emotion, how to understand body sensations in the domain of body sensations, and how to understand the fluid link between all of these and our behavioral responses. And there are various exercises that are both meditative, written, and behavioral that are kind of built around that, and the kind of skill building aspect of it, that give opportunities to directly experience the shifts or the healing, if you like, which is basically, in these terms, we're just saying healing is when something that's previously been in a state of distress shifts towards a state of calm or happiness or peace. Obviously, that's profoundly reinforcing to experience directly. And that's why I like these kind of, if you like, applied techniques where you're really aiming directly for something, because the feedback loop gets smaller then, and it's easier to learn, and people get buy-in, and that is highly motivating. And the motivation motivates you to keep up the techniques, and then you keep up the techniques, you have the persistence. That's what leads you down the road in a good way. And today, for example, these guys are going to be going home soon, so we're going to be doing a format that comes straight out of CBT. It's called a behavioral experiment, and it's basically a format to frame anything that you want to change that's often something that's kind of involves going outside your comfort zone, facing a fear, or doing something you have some resistance to doing, but you kind of know at the same time that you want to do or would benefit from doing. And there's a structured form and a format that basically helps you to really understand exactly what's going on in your thoughts and emotions, the predictions that you're making, what you believe is going to happen and go wrong that is making you fearful about doing it, or the potential consequences you want to avoid, and then framing a way of experimenting with that allows you to get very direct feedback. Because often, and to understand things you should avoid doing which we call safety behaviors, so that you can make sure you see the feedback clearly and don't misattribute it to something else you've done. And that basically means that when you go ahead and do things, you've set it up so that you catch a lot of information you might otherwise have missed. And that's how it becomes a very valuable learning experience that feeds directly back into your belief systems and allows you to then capitalize on it. And it becomes generalizable from there. And you can, really get the most out of what you want to do. So that's today's one. And there's many more like that.
Excellent. Yeah. And there's many more like that. I mean, it's just one of the tools in the toolkit to work on. And, one of my like hopes is that we can get these kinds of practices to people maybe at younger stages of development, so we can, really work on prevention or be educated in order to, get a better start at all this stuff. Sometimes you see people who are really struggling, and it's only until late in life when they really start to work on themselves, but better late than never, And I just want to thank you so much for making the time to talk to me today and everyone. And tell people where they can find you and follow you and catch up with your work and what you're doing. And if you have anything coming up or anything like that you want to tell people about, go ahead and tell them.
Thanks, Mike. It's been a pleasure to talk with you today, and it's been great to meet you and hang out with you and work with you and do ceremonies with you down here at the temple. It's been a pleasure. And I'm leaving after this workshop, and I'll be basically going off to work online. So most of my work I do online. So I talk to people on Skype for Skype sessions, and I also, obviously, a lot of that is working with people who've been here at the temple, but also I'm open to people who haven't been, because I'm essentially working for myself in that sense, as well as working for the temple. And I have a website, which is www.seanchiddy.com, which is SEANCHIDD for David Y.com. And you're welcome to get me in touch with me via the website. There's a contact page, and my email address is there. I'm very happy to hear from anyone who's interested in this kind of work. Also, obviously, if you want to find out about the temple, you're welcome to shoot me questions or check out the temple's website, which is www.templeofthewayoflight.org. I don't have any more workshops scheduled right at this moment, but any that I do, or any of the many wonderful range of ceremonies that we have, of workshops that we have, will all be listed there on the website, and we'd be really happy to see you down here. So thanks again, Mike. It's been fantastic talking to you.
All right, excellent. Well, there you go, folks. Right from the Amazon jungle, right from the heart of the Peruvian rainforest, talking some big things today with Sean. Excellent. Yeah, and likewise, man, it's been a pleasure meeting and hanging out with you. And thank you all for listening. And thank you for being patient with me with these sort of not as frequent releases. But hey, I'm in the Amazon. I'm here for 3 months. Hope you enjoy this episode. And if you do, remember, please leave a comment, leave a review on iTunes if you can. Nice 5-star review. That would really help out the show. And much love to you all. Hope you're all well. Talk to you soon. Peace. I hope you guys enjoyed that podcast as much as I did. You know what to do if you love this show. Share it, like it, spread it with your friends. Tell a friend, tell a family member, tell a neighbor, tell a coworker. And if you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/MikeBrank. You can donate as little as $1 a month. Or you could go on iTunes and leave me a nice 5-star rating and review. Whatever you do, thank you for listening. Much love to you all. Peace.